Hey.
She had been stabbed to death.
I knew it was something weird when I seen that nigga stare, bro. That nigga stared like he was a serial killer. Like he kills everybody, bro. Like, what's good? What's poppin', YouTube? It's your boy, yeah, Shay. And back at y'all with another one. Alright, so we're gonna be on this part 2 of the psycho inspired video, whatever it was called. I hope y'all enjoyed the last video. I got some shit in there. Shit. With that being said, it's by Mr. Ballin. The link to this gonna be in the description down below. There you go.
One eternity later.
He tries the door, it's locked, and then he notices the drape that's inside the apartment that's covering up this sliding glass door. It reaches almost to the ground, but not all the way. There's a couple of inches on the bottom where if you were laying on the ground, you could actually look through this little space and see into the apartment. And so that's what he does. He lies down and he puts his flashlight up and he looks through this couple-inch gap on this window. And as soon as the light illuminates what's inside of this apartment, he finds Krista. Krista is sitting on the edge of a bed that's not that far away from the sliding glass door, and she's facing the door. She's kind of hunched over at the edge of the bed. She's got no clothes on, and she's got stab marks all over her back, and she's missing her head. And her head was next to the bed to the left, up on the shelf, and it was positioned in such a way that it almost appeared like the head was looking down at the detached body.
Oh, damn!
Bro, y'all niggas weird, bro. That's some weird nigga shit, bro. Like, come on, bro. You gonna do it like that, bro? Like, what you got going on in the head? What happened to you growing up? What was happening at home?
When this crime scene was processed, the forensics team immediately noticed there were marks on the backsliding glass door where someone had used probably a screwdriver.
Hold on, that beat drop was too far.
There were marks on the backsliding glass door where someone had used probably
I'm sorry, I'm ghetto as fuck.
a screwdriver or something similar to pop the door open. And then they also found residue of duct tape on Krista's wrists, but the duct tape was gone. She was found with her hands not bound. It would later be determined that Krista had been sexually assaulted before she had been murdered. The obvious similarities between Krista's crime scene and Christine and Sonia's crime scene were initially only recognized by Gainesville police because much of the information about the two crime scenes was not public. But that night, Sunday evening, when the police went to the media and asked them to put out that bulletin to all Gainesville residents to say that there could be a killer or killers on the loose, it didn't take long for residents of Gainesville and news anchors to begin speculating that you have these two murders that have happened really close together physically. They're less than 2 miles apart, and they've probably occurred within the last 24, 48 hours. So they've happened in
That just means, bro, it's time to get the cannon!
rapid succession. They're both unsolved. And so even without intimate details of the crime scene, it wasn't hard to say, I think these two are probably connected. And so that night, Sunday evening, Gainesville really went into a state of panic. And within hours of this news, you had stores all over Gainesville that had sold out their deadbolts and locks, their mace, their stun guns, their baseball bats, their actual guns, their knives. I mean, people were really trying to arm them.
You know what I'm saying? There ain't no bitches. Them some young niggas. They out here. They ready for the action. They ready for the... Give me a second. Give me a second. Oh, I got one right here. Give me a second. Give me a second. Give me a second.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Ready? They ready for the smoke. The smoke, bruh.
Themselves to protect themselves against this unknown threat that was murdering students in Gainesville. And the police, even though they did not come out and substantiate the claims that, perhaps these two homicides are connected, they did believe they were. And so that night, Sunday night, as all this chaos is kind of unfolding in town, the police put hundreds of officers all over the place, on foot on every street corner. They had police cars and trucks parked all over the place. I mean, the entire town was on.
The block was hot, so that they had to smother that bitch, bruh. They had to smother that bitch.
an extreme heightened alert because the police believed another attack was imminent, and so all they could do was try to come out in force to try to discourage the killer or killers from striking again. But as it would turn out, it didn't work. By the following morning, so Monday morning, what was happening in Gainesville had gone from just being a Florida story to a national story, and everybody all over the country was talking about it. And one woman named Lisa Byers, who was in her 20s, she did not live in Gainesville.
20s? But she about 40, bruh. Why is her skin so sucked up to the, you know what I'm saying?
But she had a very close friend who did. She was 23-year-old Tracy Paulus. Tracy had taken some years off from college, but that year had decided to go back and give it another go. And so she was enrolled at the University of Florida. And so Lisa called Tracy and said, hey, I'm watching the news. This is crazy what's happening in your town. How are you holding up? And Tracy would tell her that, I'm just as concerned as everybody else. It's terrifying to think there are killer or killers on the loose, but I think I'm okay because I have my roommate. Tracy's roommate was 23-year-old Manny Taboda, who was this big, strong, former football player who was very close with Tracy. The two had never dated, but they had been very good friends for a number of years. And he too had taken some time off of school and had agreed to go back because Tracy had convinced him, come back, get your degree with me, and we'll live together. And so when the news broke about these killings happening.
Oh, so she gonna say that, but they not, you know what I'm saying, entangled. You feel me? I'm sorry, I'm trying not to cuss.
Happening in their town, Manny had told Tracy that he would protect her, that nothing would happen to her. And so when Lisa heard this from Tracy, that she thought that she was okay because she has Manny and, he'll look after her, and they were not planning to really leave the apartment much besides classes, Lisa was reassured, but she was still worried. And so she told Tracy, please give me a call this evening after you come back from classes just to let me know that everything is okay. And so Tracy said she would, and then they hung up. And then that evening, Tracy did not call Lisa back. And so Lisa tried calling Tracy, but no one picked up. And so that night, Lisa went to bed. She was very worried, but she went to sleep. And then early the next morning, which was Tuesday morning, she tried calling Tracy again, but there was no answer. And so Lisa reached out to a mutual friend of theirs that lived in the same apartment complex in Gainesville. His name was Tommy. And so she asked Tommy, can you please go over?
Tommy, go sit back with the Tommy. Tommy, go sit in back with the Tommy.
To Tracy's apartment and make sure she and Manny are okay. And so Tommy said, no problem. I'll give you a call from Tracy's landline once I talk to her. And so about 5 minutes later, Tracy got a call. She picked it up, and it was Tommy calling from Tracy's landline, and he was just screaming. When the police arrived at Tracy's apartment, they found Tracy in her bedroom, and like the other victims, she had no clothes on. She was positioned on the side of the bed in a very suggestive, lewd position.
What happened to Manny?
Oh, you motherfuckers.
Hey, Manny, hold up. Put your guess in the comments. Manny was probably the killer. Okay.
She had been stabbed to death.
I knew it was something weird when I seen that nigga stare, bro. That nigga stared like he was a serial killer. Like he kills everybody, bro. Like, straight in the camera, bro.
And it would turn out she had been sexually assaulted. And then down the hall from Tracy, they found Manny. He was in his bed, and he too had been stabbed to death, except he had his clothes on, and he was not positioned in a suggestive position. He had kind of died wherever he was, and that was the position they found him in. The forensics team, when they processed the scene, they found markings on the outside of the back sliding door where it looked like someone had used a screwdriver to pop open the door, and then on Tracy's wrists, they found that residue from duct tape, but there was no duct tape. It had been removed. At this point, to the police, it was undeniable that they were up against a serial killer or killers. And when the news broke that there was now a fourth and fifth victim, and they were both college students, and one of them was now this big strapping man that apparently was taken down just as easily as these other four petite women, this threw Gainesville into an absolute state of pandemonium. Suddenly, it felt like no one could protect them. The people in Gainesville Gainesville, they were fair game. It didn't matter that police were out in force in the streets and you had people walking around with guns and baseball bats and mace, and you had people locking their doors and sleeping in groups. It was like no measures were actually stopping these killings from happening. Whoever was doing it was killing with impunity. And so that day, Tuesday, you had hundreds and hundreds of students from the University of Florida just leaving the school who just didn't come back. And as for the police, they called in the FBI and the National Guard. And so by that night, Tuesday night, there were literally hundreds of officers and state police officers all over the place. There were helicopters overhead, both police helicopters and news helicopters with spotlights. They had National Guard military-style trucks all over the place. And so Gainesville was really at the highest alert you could possibly be on. But even still,
They ain't on a fucking alert, nigga. They on lockdown, you feel me? They ain't up here. They down here, you feel me?
the people of Gainesville, they were not going to feel safe until the police made an arrest. And the next day, just 24 hours after Tracy and Manny had been found, the police did just that. After receiving dozens and dozens of tips about one particular individual, they were able to arrest 19-year-old Ed Humphreys, who was a freshman at the university.
What the fuck? What's up with his face, bruh? Look at his eyes. Look into his eyes, nigga. That nigga ain't got a soul, bruh. That nigga don't have a soul. What the fuck? I should have been got this. This what I be saying about the police system, bro. What the fuck? You got all these papers on this nigga. Y'all gonna wait till he killed 5 people, then y'all wanna go check into him. It's that privilege shit. I'm just saying. If he was a man of my skin color and my culture, they would have been at that nigga ass. First arrest, first accusation. FBI, open up! First, accusation.
Florida. They arrested him for domestic abuse because he had actually struck his grandmother in the face. And so they pick him up for domestic abuse, but they set his bail at a whopping $1 million, which is way higher than you would normally expect for a domestic abuse charge. But this was a unique circumstance where he was being arrested for one thing, but really he was being looked at as the suspect of these 5 homicides. And so the police really needed him to stay behind bars. And this massive bail, that did that. He had no way to pay it. And so while Ed was behind bars, the police began investigating him, and they found there was a lot of reasons to believe he was the serial killer. He had shown he was willing to be violent because, after all, he punched his grandmother in the face.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Wait, first of all, you're not gonna speed past that like you didn't just say what you just said.
Bro, you a bitch. Look at how he did it, too. Bro, you turned your mother eye black and blue, bro. Your grandmother, bro. You a bitch, bro. My fault, I'm trying not to cuss, but dang.
Him said he was totally mentally unstable and that he hated women and that he would walk around with a knife on his belt basically all the time. And at night, he was known to walk around the forests of Gainesville. There were these very thick forests that kind of butted up against the University of Florida. And he would walk through the forest at night, which put him very close to the different apartment buildings where all the victims were found. And on top of all that, Ed Humphreys just looked like what you would imagine a serial killer would look like. He had all these deep scars all over his face, and his eyes looked totally hollow, like he was permanently on drugs, and he was seen smiling at the cameras when he was led in and out of the courtroom. And to make him even more suspicious, as soon as he was arrested, the attack stopped. There were no more slayings in Gainesville. And so naturally, the country believed Ed was the guy. Basically, everyone thought Ed was the guy. But it came back that his blood type was type A, and the killer or killer's blood type, the blood that had been found at the various crime scenes, was type B. Now, this did not clear Ed of guilt because people believed there was a chance that, he could have been involved in some way. Perhaps he had an accomplice or multiple accomplices. But when this news broke, pretty much everybody was back on edge, because clearly there's at least one or more killers that are still on the loose. Shortly after this blood type discrepancy presented itself, the FBI approached the Gainesville police and said, hey, why don't you use our VCAP program? VCAP stands for Violent Crime Apprehension Program, and what it was this computer program where it allowed investigators to input details of their crime they were investigating.
Unfortunately, I felt like somebody was behind me, bro. This music got me on edge a little bit, boo.
And when they submitted it, it would be compared against this huge database of other crimes in the country. And if there were any similarities with any other crime, those similar crimes would get popped on screen. And so when the Gainesville police input the information from these 5 student slayings in Gainesville, the computer program spit out a single match. It was from an unsolved triple homicide in 1989 in Shreveport, Louisiana, which is a town located about 800 miles to the northwest of Gainesville. Shreveport, back in the late 1980s, was considered so safe by its residents that many of them didn't lock their front doors and they would leave their car keys just sitting on their front dash. But in 1989, that would all change. On Friday, November 3rd of that year, 8-year-old Sean Grissom was...
You know what's funny? And you know what's crazy? They give us a bad rep, seeing that we're violent and we're men and we're messed up. And we'll kill you and not care. We do that shit to survive. Y'all niggas just kill a nigga just for the hell of it. On y'all repertoire, y'all got multiple killers, serial killers. On our repertoire, we just got niggas just trying to survive.
Dropped off at his grandfather's
Just saying.
house in Shreveport. He was there to celebrate his 8th birthday. And so his grandfather was this 56-year-old man named Tom who was divorced, and he was getting ready to retire soon, and he was also trying to spend more time with his grandson. And so he was very excited about having Sean over. Also staying at this house with Sean and his grandfather was Sean's aunt, 24-year-old Julie Grissom, who was a college student. She was attending Louisiana State University in Shreveport. When Sean was dropped off by his mother at his grandfather's house, the grandfather, Tom, yelled out to the boy's mother and said, I'll have him back by Monday. I'll drop him off, see you later. And so Sean's mother, she leaves, and that day and the following day, she doesn't hear from Sean's grandfather or from Julie. And so come Sunday night, she tries calling them to, see what's going on. She knows they're having a great time and doesn't really want to interrupt them, but she also hasn't heard from them. But they don't pick up. She convinces herself that everything is just fine, that I'm sure there's an explanation, and so she ends up going to bed. And so the next morning, Monday morning, when Sean is supposed to be dropped off early enough that she can take him to school, when he doesn't show up, the mother calls the grandfather back and tries to get in touch and figure out what's going on, but she can't get in touch with him. And so she's telling herself that, okay, well, his grandfather must have just dropped him off at school. And so the mother calls Sean's school, and the school says, no, we have not seen Sean today, and we haven't heard from him, so we don't know what's going on. And so now Sean's mother is terrified. She calls the police, and the police actually get in touch with the neighbor of Tom Grissom, and they ask this neighbor, hey, can you go next door and just make sure Tom and Sean and Julie are okay? And so this neighbor says, no problem. They leave their house, and immediately they notice, as they're looking at Tom's house, that the 2 cars in the driveway had not left since Friday. It was just something the neighbor noticed. And then they also noticed that there were 2 newspapers at the end of the driveway. It was the Monday and Sunday paper. And they knew Tom always read the newspaper. And so the idea that he would just leave them sitting at the end of the driveway, that didn't really add up. And so the neighbor...
They got Tom, bruh. They got Tom.
Walks around to the front door, and they notice there are lights on inside, and they knock on the front door, but there's no answer. They try the front door, but it's locked. And so they end up going around to the very back of the house, and they're able to get into the house through the garage. And then through the garage, they open another door that leads into the main part of the house. And this neighbor, they immediately see on the ground towards the back door near the kitchen is Tom. He's laying on the ground, and he's obviously deceased. And so this neighbor, they run out, they call the police. The police come back over. They go inside the house, and sure enough, they find Tom Grissom has been stabbed to death. He's laying on the ground near the back door. They find Sean Grissom, the 8-year-old. He's slouched over on the couch in front of the TV, and he's been stabbed to death as well. And then upstairs, they found 24-year-old Julie, the aunt, and she was positioned on the edge of the bed in this very suggestive way. She had no clothes on, and she had been stabbed to death, and it would later be determined she had also been sexually assaulted before she...
Man, these niggas Horny ass, man. Take y'all bitches, man. Fuck, bro.
Recalculating.
This shit, man. This shit, bro.
A few moments later.
If you ain't welcome nowhere else, you welcome here. That being said, I share army. You better join this motherfucking army. You might finish this in the next one, bro. That being said, man, I'm out.